Hello, I'm Samantha and this is Read That. Welcome to the second episode of the podcast. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you all for listening to the first episode and for showing it so much love. It really means a lot, and I hope you've come back to listen to the second one. Or if you're new, thank you for being here and I hope you stay around. Today's episode is just going to be a few topics I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover my TBR for the year, my ins and outs for 2026 as well, and I also wanted to quickly discuss what my thoughts were on the movie adaptation of The Housemaid and the show adaptation of His and Hers. I wanted to create a quick segment at the start of every pod episode to mention what I'm currently reading. I thought this would be a fun way to keep track of all the books that we're currently reading, but also it can be a way for me to suggest books to you. And I would also love if you could comment back and tell me what you're currently reading, which also can inspire others to not only read, but also we can all get recommendations from each other. So for today's episode, I'm actually currently reading two books at the moment. I'm reading The Goal by Ali Kennedy, which is the fourth in the Off-Campus series. I'm reading that one on paperback. I'm also listening to the audio of Iron Flame. I'm listening to that on Audible. And that one is the second book after Fourth Wing. Now, let's get into the episode. So the first topic for today's episode is what's on my TBR for 2026. Now, TBR, for those that don't know, is to be read. So it's basically just a list of books that you want to read. It can be as long or short as you want. This year, I got a reading journal for Christmas, a paper journal where you can just write all the books you want to read and then you rate them by hand on what you thought about them and score them and just put down your thoughts. But I thought it was a good way because it's actually like a physical thing. It's not like online. Anyways, at the beginning of this book, you basically has this long list of your TBR. So I created mine. And so for my TBR this year, in no particular order, so it doesn't matter when I read them, I just want to read them. The first book is the next two books in the Boys of Tommen series. So Taming 7 and Releasing 10, both by Chloe Welsh. Then the next book is The Goal by Ali Kennedy, which I actually am currently reading. Then I want to finish the rest of the Windy City series, so Caught Up, Play Along and Rewind It Back by Liz Tom Ford. And I also want to read Iron Flame and Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, which I have started listening to the audio version of Iron Flame, so we're nearly there. I wanted to read this year the Chestnut Spring series by Alice Silver. So that's got 5 in the series. It's got Flawless, Heartless, Powerless, Reckless, and Hopeless. The next one on the list is the rest of the King of Sin series by Anna Hong, King of Sloth and King of Envy, book 4 and 5. I also want to read the Gold Rush Range series by Alice Silver as well. So this one has 4. It's got Off to the Races, A Photo Finish, A Front Runner, and A False Start. I also want to go back and finish the rest of the Addicted/Colloway Sisters series. So there's 5 left for that one that I have to read. I have to read Thrive, Addicted After All, Fuel the Fire, Long Way Down, and Same Kind of Perfect. The next book is Colleen Hoover's new book, Woman Down, I want to read. I'm actually really excited for this one because I feel like Colleen Hoover hasn't released a book in quite a while. And this one as well is a psychological mystery one, which I think is quite different for her as well. I know she has Verity, but she usually does romancy books. So excited for that one. The next one on the list is Pucking Around by Emily Ranch, which is just a hockey romance. I'm really excited for that one. I think it's a series as well, but I'm just putting the first one down for now. And then I want to read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Now that one has been on my TBR for several years now and everyone raves about it, but this year I'm going to do it. The next part of today's episode is my ins and outs for reading in 2026. Now I just want to preface this that if you do any of these or don't want to do any of these, that is totally fine. You can do what you want, but I just feel like this is just a fun little way to make reading a bit fun, you know? So my ins for this year are audiobooks. Now, I've never thought to read an audiobook. I think the only other time I've ever read an audiobook was in year 12 when I did read an audiobook was in year 12 when you have to read the English book for exams. I think I had to do The Dressmaker and I read that on Audible because I'm I'm not reading this. So Audible was more fun, but I'm bringing them back this year. So far, I'm on my second one. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I'm reading Iron Flame on Audible and I listened to Fourth Wing on Audible as well. I want to listen to audiobooks because, especially for fantasy, I feel like you can just really immerse yourself in the story, especially now with the dramatized versions and different characters. I feel like it It's like watching a movie, but obviously you're not seeing it. Audiobooks are in for the year. The next in for the year for me is getting more into fantasy/romantasy reads. Now, I've never been one to read fantasy or romantasy. The only books that you would consider fantasy that I've read is Harry Potter. And even that, I don't consider that much of fantasy. So I've always wanted to get into fantasy because everyone raves about it, especially like Fourth Wing and Akata and all those type of books. And like Quicksilver, everyone raves about it. So this year is going to be the year that I get into it. For the year is rereading books, especially books that I obviously love, and rereading them by listening to the audio version of it, especially if it's like a dramatized, different actors kind of audio. The next in for the year is actually just enjoying and fully immersing/absorbing a story instead of just adding the book as like a number that I've read. I know we all have reading goals, and I did set one this year as well of like how many books we want to read, but actually just like enjoying the book and not just going, I need to finish this because I need to add it to the score. Like actually taking my time, immersing myself, and like actually concentrating and like actually absorbing the information. It probably sounds obvious to some, but I really want to make a point of it this year. Now moving on to my outs for the year. Now again, if you do any of these, that's not my business and I'm not judging you for it. My outs for the year is judging people / not being considered a good reader or a real reader if you don't read over like 100 books in a year. But if you do read 100 books, we're also not judging, but people think that if you only read like 10 books in the year, that you're not a real reader, but you are. So we're leaving that in 2025. The next out is judging people for what they read. For example, if it's romantasy, romance, smut, how spicy, how not spicy. If it's a non-fiction, like a self-help book, we're not judging people for that, because I feel like there's a very big trend now. People want to read, but they only want to read like self-help books, like a Mel Robbins type of Let Them Theory, Atomic Habits, those kind of books, which is all valid to read. Like go ahead, I read them sometimes too. They're good books, but I'm just saying people sometimes think that just because you're reading like a fiction book or like a smutty book that it's not like proper and like it doesn't count, but it does. So we're leaving judging people for what they read in 2025. The next out for the year is not reading diversely. Now what I mean by this is going based more on your mood. So being more like a mood reader. So reading multiple books at once, which I think is fine. A lot of people can't do it, but it just depends on the book. But also like starting a series and then stopping and going to read something else and then coming back, finishing the series. Doesn't mean that it's not good. I just want to go based on my mood and I want to read as many books as I possibly can. So I'm going to read more different types and also opening up more to like different authors and not just going based on what popular books are going all the time on TikTok, and actually finding different authors and actually broadening my horizons in that way. Next topic I wanted to cover is my thoughts on the Housemaid movie adaptation. So it's based on The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. Now I read the book for The Housemaid back in 2024. So it had been over a year, but before I went to go watch the movie, I did read a summary of it again to refresh my memory, and did listen to a podcast episode of someone explaining it chapter by chapter again to save me time to reread it. But I went to watch it on the day it came out in cinemas with my mum, and I have watched it twice since again. So I've watched it twice now because I think it was pretty good. But let me just give you a quick synopsis of the book for those that haven't read it or seen the movie. So there is going to be spoilers. So if you don't like spoilers, just skip ahead. If you do, keep listening. So The Housemaid is a psychological thriller written by Freida McFadden. So it's about the main character, Millie, who has just come out of prison after being in prison for 10 years, and she's looking for a job. And so she gets a job as a live-in housemaid for the Winchester family. Now, the Winchester family are very rich, and so she works for Nina Winchester, who appears to be like crazy and unstable. And then she has her husband, Andrew, which is like your typical attractive guy, and everybody adores and loves. So Millie gets this job, and it's a live-in position, but she's given the attic as her room. So it's just like this tiny little room. It's got like one window. It's very like secluded. She's kind of just by herself up there. But throughout the book, you see Millie doing her job and Nina's behavior gets a bit more crazy and erratic over time. She basically like will gaslight Millie into thinking she said one thing, but then when the time comes she goes, no, I didn't, and then she has like outbursts, and she basically just manipulates Millie, and as the reader you think Nina is this crazy woman. For example, one time Nina told Millie to buy Nina and Andrew movie tickets to go watch like a show and then book a hotel afterwards, and she had given her a specific date to do it, and then Millie booked it as the housemaid. That was her job. And then she gives the tickets to Nina, and Nina cracks it and goes, why would you book these tickets? I'm busy that day, you know we can't, now we're going to lose our money, and yada yada yada. So just things like that, like she'll say one thing and then completely change. Now, so Nina appears to be crazy, and Millie starts to trust Andrew more because he's the more kind and sympathetic, and it's like, it's okay, like helps her out with when she's upset about Nina yelling at her and calms her down. But then it's revealed that Andrew is actually abusive and Nina is actually a victim of his. And so basically then Millie is put through the same abuse as Nina was. And in the end, Millie does get Andrew back and gives him what he deserves, and he does end up getting killed. So that's what happens in the book. Now, my thoughts on the movie is that they pretty much did stick to this storyline. I would say like 90 to 95% of the movie was according to the book, which I really liked, and I really loved that it did the book justice, because a lot of movie adaptations I feel like change a bit too much. But this one actually didn't change anything. I think the only slight changes that I would say were changed, I felt were needed to make the movie a bit more dramatic and more better for viewing. For example, in the book, when Millie's locked up in the attic, once Nina's gone, Andrew tortures her, but in the book, the form of torture is different. So for example, in the book, Andrew makes Millie rest multiple books on her stomach for hours at a time, whereas in the movie, he makes her cut her stomach with the piece of glass from the plate 21 times. So I see how they've made that one different, because how boring would it be to watch a girl in a room for like 10, 12 plus hours with books on her stomach? Like, yes, it's torture, but also from a viewer's standpoint, it's not really entertaining. Another example as well is when Millie gets out of the attic and puts Andrew in it. In the movie, it all happens when Nina comes back and opens the door. And then there's like the whole fighting and stabbing and pushing off the stairs and all that sort of gory stuff. Whereas that doesn't happen in the book. In the book, she gets out, puts Andrew in, and then makes Andrew do what she basically had to do with the books, but on his private parts. And then she gets upset and says, no, you didn't do it, and makes him redo it. But she does make him pull out his tooth, which is in the movie. Because again, it's really gory. I couldn't watch that scene in the movie. It was too much. I'm like, I had to look away. I'm like, oh my God, ew. But it was in the book, so it had to be done. And the way he dies too in the book is different to in the movie. In the book, he basically is just in the attic for so long, and he just dies of starvation and obviously blood loss from his tooth and all that sort of stuff. Where he comes back to save Millie in the book, she opens the attic door and he's already dead. Whereas in the movie, when Nina comes and opens the door, he runs out, and then there's the whole fighting, pushing down the stairs, stabbing, a lot more blood. Another thing that was slightly changed from the book was the policewoman at the end. At the end of the movie, there's the policewoman that basically like hushes the story over, and it's like, oh, things just happen, and like nothing, like Millie won't get like consequences, or Nina won't get consequences for Andrew's death. Whereas in the book, it's a guy policeman, and it's the father of Andrew's ex-fiance. Whereas in the movie, the police officer is the sister of the ex-fiance. But that's, I feel like, is redundant. Like, it doesn't really matter if it's a boy or a girl, but the fact that the connection of the ex-fiance is still there is what makes it good. The only thing that I would say I didn't like about the movie, but this is also personal preference, is that there was a lot of like blood and gore, and it just icks me out. I can't watch things like that, like seeing the teeth getting pulled, even the hair when Nina had to pick the hairs out. Oh my God, I can't do it. But aside from that, I really, really liked the movie. Again, another complaint I did have though is Enzo. Now, I love Enzo, nothing wrong with his acting. I just feel like in the movie, they didn't feature him enough, because in the books, he's a lot more present. And in the books, Millie actually finds Enzo hot and actually tries to get with him first before she fell in love with Andrew. She actually tries to get with Enzo first, which is like a funny little interaction, which I feel like would have been funny in the movie. Also, it doesn't really set up for how he should be in the movie more, because his role in the next 2 books is very, very big. So I don't know how they're going to implement that, or he's just going to appear again and the storyline continues. But he should have, I feel like, been more in the movie. Like, he was like a background character, where it made him seem like he wasn't really relevant, but he is relevant. He's like helped Nina, and he's going to be really big in book 2 and 3. So I feel like he just needed to be in there more. Because I had seen a few people say, like, why was he there? Like, there was no point to his character. And I'm like, but there is a point. It's just the movie didn't do his character justice. So I hope that they fix that in book 2 or 3, and I hope to see how they're going to play on it. Also, another thing I want to say is that at the end of the book / movie, you have Andrew's funeral. In the epilogue of the book, it's a bit more clear that the mum was who abused Andrew as a kid, and that's why Andrew does what he does and how he had been brought up. But I feel like in the movie that was a bit unclear, and I feel like kind of was skipped over, and you would only probably have understood it if you had watched the movie. So overall, I think this is a really good movie, and it did the book justice, and it did stick to the book. It's one of the best movie adaptations I have seen. I think if you don't like reading, and you've seen the movie and you like the movie, but you don't like reading books, you probably don't have to read it. Like, you pretty much know the story. If you do like reading books, obviously go ahead, read it. It gives you more context. It gives you more background into what the actual book / movie is about, and it just makes the experience better. That's why I would still recommend, if you haven't seen either, read the book, then read the movie, because it will give you that added context. But if you're not a reader, just stick with the movie and you'll know the story. But then again, if you're a reader, do both. The next show adaptation of a book I'm going to discuss is the His and Hers book by Alice Feeney. Now, I read His and Hers as well quite a while back. I read it back in 2023. Now, this movie adaptation was turned into a show on Netflix. It's a 6-episode series. They go for about like 30 to 45 minutes. I'll give you a quick synopsis of the book. So again, this may contain spoilers. Skip along if you don't want to hear spoilers. If you do, keep listening. So His and Hers by Alice Feeney, again, is another psychological thriller, and the book goes between the POVs of Anna Andrews, which is the main female character. She's a BBC News presenter, and the POV of Jack Harper, who is a detective. And you also get the POV of the killer. So a woman is murdered in a town called Blackdown, and Anna returns back to the town to cover the case, and Jack is assigned as the detective to work out who this killer is. So Jack is suspicious of Anna, and he quickly becomes a suspect in the case as well. He actually was with her the night the first victim was murdered, so he becomes a suspect as well. But then as the book goes on, more women are dying, and it becomes more obvious that the murders are linked together. So as the reader, you're really torn between who could the killer be, because you're getting the killer's POV and Anna and Jack. So you're like, could it be her? Could it be him? And it just messes with your brain. So I was really, really excited for this book to be turned into a show, because I enjoyed the book a lot. I gave the book a 5 stars, and I was really excited. When I read the book, I was really hooked, because you don't know who it is. It switches between the POVs, and it's similar to the killer. And I just remember when I was reading it, it was one of those books, I'm like, I need to keep reading this. I need to find out. And you would get to the end of one of the person's POV and be like, oh my God, it's them. And then you would read the next chapter and be like, wait a minute, I think it's this one now. So it's one of those books, you're torn between the two. It's like a fast-paced book. Now, the show I felt like was a bit of a drag. I'm not going to lie. They had 6 episodes, so about 30 minutes each. Now, my initial thoughts on the show is that it was a bit of a drag. I feel like they dragged out a lot of scenes that didn't really need to be dragged out, whereas the important stuff was quickly like rushed over. For example, the last episode of the season was only 30 minutes long, and all the action I feel like happened in that 30 minutes, whereas they could have spread it out a bit and it could have carried started in like episode 5 and carried a bit more into it. I feel like episode 1 and 2 was a lot of the same thing. It just was a bit slow, and I feel like things weren't happening in order of the book, like the deaths in the order. And I feel like you didn't really get that vibe of, oh, Jack could be the murderer, or Anna could be the murderer, or this person could be the murderer. It was very just like watching people fight about unnecessary things. I don't know how to explain it, but that wasn't clear that these people could be the murderer. The only way it was positioned that Jack might be the murderer is because he was seen last with the first victim. And then once the second victim is found, that is quickly passed by, and that's already done in like episode 2. I also didn't really like the actors, which I feel like played a big part in whether I liked it or not. I feel like the actor who played Jack / the character of Jack in the show was the only likable one. I feel like Priya was good too. I did like Priya. Priya, the other detective, was nice. But Anna, oh my god, I don't know if it was just the way she had to play the part, but I just found her really annoying, and I felt like she just didn't care about the investigation going on. She just wanted to focus on her job. She gave selfish energy, but I feel like in the book she had a bigger part to play, and it was more obvious that maybe she was involved, even though I know she wasn't the murderer in the end. But yeah, I just found her character annoying, and lots of the other people too. I just was like, oh, you can so tell it's fake. Aside from the actual actors, I felt like the show, you could tell it was fake. Obviously there's murders, so you're gonna see dead bodies and like stabs and stuff, but you could literally tell they were dummies. Like, you know, the dummies you practice CPR on, like you could literally tell that they were like fake plastic dummies. I'm like, I know it's a show and obviously it's not gonna be real, but we've got AI now, like they can make it at least somewhat realistic. The actual filming of the show, they didn't stick to the book. I'd say it was probably like maybe 80% the same. Like the general plot was there, the people who were murdered, I guess, were there. They kept the killer the same. I swear, I was getting to the point, if this killer changes, then the whole book is ruined. But they kept that the same. Like I said before, the only change as well, I feel like the order of murders was different. Again, the friendship bracelet theme wasn't really shown that much in the show, whereas in the books that's a big deal, and that's how, as the reader, you know that these are all linked and somebody is doing this on purpose. Whereas I feel like the friendship bracelets was featured, but it just wasn't as strong as it was. They also changed the location that it was set in. In the book it's set in England and they changed it to America, and I think that's why as well I didn't like the show, because they were talking these, like, I think it was from Georgia, somewhere from the south, it's accents, and I'm like, you can tell these accents are fake too. I was like, I just can't do it. Like, they just didn't sound the same. So overall, the show really wasn't my favorite, to be honest. I wouldn't bother watching it personally. I only watched it because, again, it was a book adaptation that I really liked and I wanted to see how they did it justice. I think you could probably skip it unless you really do like thriller and crime and that's like all you consume and that's all you watch. Give it a go, but don't expect much from it. I just would have liked it to dive a bit deeper. Again, stick to the book, but dive a bit deeper and not rush over such important scenes. So they're my overall thoughts for His and Hers. I didn't really enjoy it. That's it for today's episode. I know it's a bit of a short one, but I just wanted to touch on a few little topics that I had on my mind. So let me know what your ins and outs for the year are and what you're currently reading, and if you agree with my opinions of The Housemaid and His and Hers adaptations. I'd love to know. Thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate you being here, and I can't wait to talk again for the next episode. Please let me know what other topics you would like to hear me talk about, and please don't forget to rate and share the podcast with everyone that you know on Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to follow Read That with Samantha on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Bye.